17 in our book of Proverbs series. Chapter 17, better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. And that is pretty neat observations, kind of like saying, hey, it is better to have an okay meal with a house that is not fighting, that is not arguing, that is not in contentions, versus having food and feasting, but the house is full of arguments and fighting and etc. So better to have something light, or better small, but in being in a house, or in a life, not just only a house, but even a life with a little but with much peace is better than a house with much but a lot of fighting and arguing and contentions. And also with jobs, this can be relating to jobs, this could be relating to relationships, friendships, anything in your life. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of something, but there's a pain with it. It's worse versus having little, but there's peace. Peace outweighs what you may have in your life. So it is better to have peace, little with peace, than much with fights and arguments and things like that. A wise servant will rule over a son who causes shame, and will share an inheritance among the brothers, right? And it's saying that someone who is wise, a servant, will rule. If a servant is wise, okay, for example, I own a restaurant and I own some businesses. If I have an employee that is really good, I would give them authority and leadership over my own child if my own child is not a great worker. If my own child brings shame or does not do well, I'm going to make this employee the leader and the boss in my place of business. So it is, a wise servant will rule over a son who causes shame, and will share an inheritance among the brothers, right? The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts. All right, let me bring this up a little bit bigger here, everyone. Refining pot is for silver and furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts. All right, so we can't remove the dross from our heart. It's God who removes it. The pot for silver and gold, they use it to heat up and to remove the impurities from the silver and gold. But the Lord removes the impurities from our heart, and that's where we need to always go to Him. Lord, remove these impurities from my heart. An evildoer gives heed to false lips. A liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. Person who's just really always looking for gossip. What's the nearest gossip? What's the next lie? What's the next? They're ready to accept anything that comes their way. He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker. He who is glad at calamity will not go unpunished. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. So when we look at my grandkids, the children's children are the crown of old men. We look at that and go, oh, praise God, my kids are my crown, are the glory, but my children's children is that crown that God puts upon the head of a grandparent. Excellent speech is not becoming to a fool, much less lying lips to a prince. A present is a precious stone in the eyes of its possessor. Wherever he turns, he prospers, right? So a person who really understands, what they have is able to utilize what they have. So many people never consider the things that they have today. They're always wondering, what can I have later? What can I get? What else can I buy? Rather than saying, how can I use what I have here? He who covers and you know what? As I was saying I'm trying to find an analogy like that. Um, I guess the analogy I would kind of correlate this to is a fisherman. If you've ever looked at a tackle box of a fisherman, they got all this tackle. They got crankbait, jigs, worms, you name it. They got all this tackle, and sometimes they only stick to like one or two, items in their tackle box. But they got all this stuff, and you're like, why do you have all this stuff? Because they're like, okay, I got this. What else can I buy that might work? What else? What rather than just using with what you have? This, of course, this is just a funny analogy, but it's kind of like that too. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. So if someone sinned, and you have love for them, you're not gonna expose it. But if you don't have love for them, you're gonna always bring it up. Do you remember that time? Do you remember that time? And this person who repeats a matter, constantly repeating it, bringing it back up. When you're trying to bring peace, there are people that when if you're a peacemaker, you're just trying to be like, you know what? Okay, whatever. Let's just move on. But this person who is not trying to cause peace will bring up a matter again. It could be the same time. It could be maybe later on. They bring it back up. And what they do is they cause separation. It is better, if you want to keep friends, is just to kind of like, okay, we're done. We're done with that. Move on. Rebuke is more effective for a wise man than 100 blows on a fool. If a person is wise, they're going to accept correction. But if a person's not, no matter how many times you hit them, they just don't get it. An evil man seeks only rebellion. Therefore, a cruel messenger will be sent against him. So, a person who's evil and their heart is evil, they're looking only how can I rebel? Therefore, a cruel messenger means like they're gonna find themselves on the wrong end of the stick. Let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. That's powerful. I'd rather, what he's saying is, it is better for a person to encounter a mama bear than to find a fool doing his stupidity. Whoever rewards evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. Listen to that. That's so, because especially in our society today, that is exactly what it's doing. It is rewarding evil for good. Rewards evil for good, right? Whoever rewards evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. And these people, when you're out there and you're doing what is good, what are the people doing? They're punishing you. They're trying to reward you evil for doing good. Christians are being accused of this and that, and they're degraded, and their things are thrown at them, and they're cussed at. Well, evil will not depart from that person's house because they're rewarding evil for good. And vice versa, really. If you reward good for evil, same thing. It's not going to depart. Evil will not depart from your house. The beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contention before a quarrel starts. So releasing water means you're pouring. Once it goes, it goes. It's hard to stop once that water goes. So it's better to stop. Don't even let it get out of your mouth. Just quiet before it starts. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the just, both of them are like an abomination to the Lord. Just like what I said in verse 13. If you justify the wicked, like you're making an excuse or you're permitting them for their wickedness, and the one who condemns the just, meaning you're accusing or you're rewarding evil for those who are good, both of them are an abomination to the Lord. Why is there in the hand of a fool the purchase price of wisdom, since he has no heart for it? So a person can have as much money that a fool's not going to want to buy wisdom, even no matter how much money you give to them. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity, or sister, or whatever it is. A brother or sister. I mean, it's very odd that you see sisters as best friends or brothers as best friends. It does happen. Um, but a friends, people have usually friends that are much more closer than their own brother. A man devoid of understanding shakes hands in a pledge and becomes surety for his friend, meaning you co-sign. Don't try not to co-sign for people. I know that they're your friends and they're, oh, that's my buddy. But a person who co-signs for someone else, especially if you're really close to them, it's not really good. You're going to find yourself into having a lot of problems. So try not to co-sign for people um, with that. Okay. He who transgresses loves strife. Okay. Okay, there you go. He who loves transgression loves strife, and he who exalts his gates seeks destruction. That's self-explanatory. He who has a deceitful heart finds no good, and he who has a perverse tongue falls into evil. He who begets a scoffer does so to his sorrow. Okay? If you beget, meaning if you bring forth a scoffer, if you're raising lazy children and lazy kids, you're going to do this to your sorrow. And the father of a fool has no joy. All right? A father of a fool has no joy. A merry heart does good, like medicine. So a heart that's joyful, it does good. If you want medicine, there's nothing like laughter. There's actually, it is medically, there's medical science in it that says that when a person laughs, it's good for them. It's good for their blood pressure, their heart, etc. It provides certain endorphins in laughter. So, having a good heart, having a happy heart is good. All right. But a broken spirit dries the bones. A wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back to pervert the ways of justice. Wisdom is in the sight of him who has understanding, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. Right? So, and this is again wisdom. A person who's wise is looking right here, present. How can I use with what God has given to me? Remember, knowledge is knowing something. Wisdom is applying what you know. Eyes of a fool is not worried about here. They're trying to figure out what else. What else can I do? What else can happen? A foolish son is a grief to his father, and bitterness to her who bore him. And look at the difference between that grief to his father. A father who looks at a son or a child and they're foolish. A father's like, oh, like they're disconnected and they're looking at the kid and they're just disconnected. But they're like, this kid is a fool. But a mother doesn't disconnect her kid herself from a kid. Rather, a mother has bitterness in her soul. She feels bitter. It's more of an internal thing. She doesn't disconnect. She looks at a foolish child and she's connected internally. Also, to punish the righteous is not good, nor to strike princesses for their uprightness. In other words, hurting someone for doing good. And kind of again, repeat from what we said on the top. He who has knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a calm spirit. So if you know sometimes it's better to be quiet and don't say anything and watch what your words than to constantly be talking and talking and talking. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. When he shuts his lips, he's considered perceptive. So look, I know that there are some people who are not smart, and there are some people who are not knowledgeable, and there are some people who just don't know, who may be foolish. Sometimes it's better just to be quiet and just be like, listening. Just listen. Sometimes listening, when you leave a meeting, if you're sitting there and you're listening to a conversation and you're just kind of like, kind of listening in, and and then you get up and you leave from that meeting or that conversation and without saying much, sometimes you're perceived as wise. And it's remarkable because let's say there's two people talking, right? There's two people talking, and then you're sitting there and you're listening to this conversation. And maybe they're debating about something or arguing about something. And then really put in 2 cents. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. You're not really that, you know. But then you get up from the conversation. Sometimes you'll find these two people, one of the two people will come to you and be like, you know what I'm talking about, right? And you could be like, yeah. Another person, you know what I'm talking about, right? You're like, yeah, yeah. And they're like, oh, this person, they know what I'm talking about. And even a fool is like they're wise. So sometimes it's best to just shut up than to speak up in certain matters. And that's